Yesterday, David Pakman made a video where he admits to self-censorship. I think it's actually a really good video, and I want to start this video out by saying it will be a response partly to this, where I elaborate on my views about where the left is at, what it means to me to be on the left. I don't think I'm like some super leftist. I think just like lean a little bit more towards the Democrats and always have. But I want to address some of what David said. And then I want to show you a series of graphics and its data showing how, in my view of the world, the left has gone completely off the rails. Off the rails. I got a ton of charts. I want to start by saying, for one, I think David's a good dude. I like his stuff. I actually watch his videos periodically. There's very few people I actually watch on YouTube. He's one of them. I always want to give a shout out to Kyle Kalinske and Jimmy Dore, who I think are really good people. Look, I think we all disagree. And so long as we can have a conversation, we're in good company. So David and I disagree on a lot of things. Probably agree on most things, even policy-wise to an extent. But we can disagree, and in the end, I periodically talk to him. I think he's a cool dude. So I want to start by saying this. He highlights this tweet as the opener to his segment talking about how he does censor himself out of a fear of what he calls a slice of the left that overreacts on certain issues. And he's right. I do believe it is a slice of the left that does this because I believe, when you look at like the Hidden Tribes report, which I cite all the time, I actually don't have pulled up, 8% of this country is progressive activists. And every other liberal group is called the exhausted majority. Based on the data I see, based on my experiences, how I talk to people, I believe most of the left is inactive or exhausted, not participating. One of the reasons Trump won. A lot of Hillary's voters didn't go out, either from hubris, they thought they couldn't lose, or they're just over it. They wanted Bernie. Bernie was who they actually voted for, and he was out. So David, in the beginning, says that he calls me an independent journalist, says that I claim to be center-left, but he views me primarily as an antagonist of the left. And I think that's actually a really, really good point. Not that I agree with David. I don't think I'm primarily an antagonist of the left. My main channel video today was about antitrust and political bias. And when you look at my content, sure, by all means, like the thumbnails, the titles, you can get a certain view, and that view should be very simple. I've explained this before. For one, I've been physically attacked multiple times by far leftists. I've had my life threatened. I've been forced to flee various countries because of them. Doesn't change my political views on what I think is right. It says to me that there's a growing faction of insane individuals on the left that must be called out, and they're gaining traction, and no one is calling them out. That's probably the most important thing. The second issue is, I worked for Vice News and Fusion. I have seen the media bias. Yes, I constantly call out the media. As someone who is outside of that journalistic sphere and seeing this, I have been antagonized myself by the far left, and they are very powerful to the point where NBC News and the Today Show published overt fake news about me, smearing me, just because I got invited to the White House. So I don't view myself as primarily an antagonist of the left. I try to, and I'm not perfect, but I try to differentiate between what is dominating the left and what the left actually is. But this is a really good point brought up by David, inadvertently I would say, in that the fact that David is a progressive and on the left, and the fact that I still view myself as holding left-wing positions means the left is fractured, period. I recently went on the Glenn Beck show, and we had a good discussion about whether a baker in Colorado should bake the cake, about pro-choice versus pro-life. I defended the pro-choice position. I've defended the baker's, the not baking a cake position. Although we respected the nuance, the difficulty in ethics, we had a real conversation where we tried to understand how we could compromise and bring these things together. That does not make me conservative. My position is mostly on the left. More importantly, I believe in a progressive tax. I'm currently supporting a couple Democrats. The issue is the left is absolutely fractured. I have data to back this up. So I want to highlight this tweet first that David mentions. I said on Twitter, my lefty friends message me every so often that they are scared of speaking out against the far left because they will get attacked. Because they won't push back on the far left, Dems don't see opposition and embrace woke Twitter. This will lead to Trump's 2020 landslide. Admittedly a bit hyperbolic, but I will point out too, there's supposed to be a comma there. And so it's like David saw it as because they won't push back on the far left Dems, don't see opposition and embrace woke Twitter. What I'm trying to say here is my friends from Chicago, I try to avoid exposing who they are. It's really funny. People are like, Tim, if you have left-wing friends, why don't you ever post videos about them? Because they're terrified. I'm not exaggerating. I have no problem speaking out all day. And what happens? I get called an antagonist. I get called right-wing. I get smeared all day and night. I get death threats. At one point, someone posted pictures of my mom simply for calling out bad actors on the left. And I see the problem getting worse. I call it out. But let's move on. The point of this tweet is that I talk to my friends about immigration, and they say, I'm concerned about healthcare. I think we should have universal healthcare. I'm like, yeah, I don't disagree. I just don't know how we get there. And they're like, yeah, that's a good point. But what about giving healthcare to illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants? What do you want to call them? And they say, that's nuts to me. They say that to me. And I say, why don't you speak up? Because I will be destroyed. That's what I was told. I will be destroyed. I'm not going to tell you who these people are, but you can look like, man, I've got pictures with people on the internet, and I'm going to avoid naming anybody because their careers will be ended if they say this. Any one of these people, if they come out and say, I don't think we should be giving healthcare to undocumented immigrants, they will be attacked for it. Look at Ricky Gervais being called a transphobe now. Fortunately, he's famous enough to where it doesn't affect him. But what about people who work, as a PA on a production set in Hollywood? They can't say this. They will lose their jobs. And people say like, oh, it's an edge. Like, well, David said to me, it's an edge case. He doesn't think it's a slice of the left. Listen, man, I don't think everyone on the left is engaging in this behavior, but the people on the left are saying nothing about it or ignoring it. And the next biggest faction, the resistance, doesn't seem to care either. Why don't we get any news coverage about what happened in ICE? I'm sorry, what happened at the ICE facility in Tacoma? The guy with the AR who shows up with firebombs. Where was the widespread coverage? But the Covington kid, a kid standing on steps, just smirking at a guy, that's wall-to-wall coverage? You got to tell me that's, look, man, that is affecting national discourse to an extreme degree. What this says to me is the Democrats in the debate stage are pushing this rhetoric, okay, because they see it online and they don't see moderate left-wing individuals challenging it. And because the moderate left are out of the game for whatever reason, out of fear or just being exhausted, there's very few people that are now in the middle, used to be on the left, that are defending this. I can look to people who look at the walk away campaign. People who have just said, screw it, I'm out, and they go Trump. I won't do that. I won't. I'll still stick up for what I think is the right thing to do, regardless of if I'm being attacked by these people. Why do I look like Tulsi Gabbard? Primary issue, anti-war, totally support it. Okay? She's called for the defense of free speech. She called out the big tech companies. She's talked about things that matter to me, and she is a major in the National Guard. She seems presidential, and she seems like the right choice. Disagree with a lot of her, with some of her domestic policy, but not to an extreme degree, just a little bit. I think in the end she's a great choice, and so is Andrew Yang. But that makes me not on the left. They call Tulsi and Yang the alt-right. All that matters is if the left are willing to throw us out, the left is fractured, period. Because I'm certainly not a conservative. I am pro-choice, pro-progressive tax. I can say it a million times, okay? I don't fit with, whatever the conservative is, except for defending, free speech. That's ridiculous. So this is why I think, again, hyperbolic, Trump will win. Because the Democrats don't see us. They don't. They see the woke insanity on Twitter. I kid you not. Look at this story. Why did Trump make the OK sign while talking about AOC? This is the Rolling Stone. Heaven help me. Okay? This is not some fringe random blog. This is mainstream papers presenting things that literally mean nothing. Donald Trump does that all the time. Why is this a story? It is happening every day, and I've got the data to back up exactly what's going on, and I will put the link to this in the description below so you can read it. A series of graphs, left-wing identitarianism, and the biased media and how we get to this point. But I do want to make one point to push back on David a little bit. When he says I'm an antagonist of the left, the reason I don't call people grifters for the most part, although they exist, is because you can take a look at David's channel and they do the same thing to me that you could do to him. You can see all of his thumbnails that are segments with tons of views, Trump's epic meltdown. It's framed in a way that's antagonizing to the right, and he's saying it for a progressive audience. Me, I'm targeting a moderate. I mean, I'll say this. I don't think David is intentionally trying to target anybody. I think he's expressing his opinion on these issues, as am I. And so I see stories I think are interesting. I talk about them. And so very similarly, David's got thumbnails that target Trump. I have thumbnails that target wokeness, the media, the far left, things that I think are bad. It doesn't change my policy positions. And if David thinks that that makes me an antagonist of the left, well, then it's an interesting statement about how powerful the woke, identitarian, and authoritarian left really is. But look, by all means, criticize me. I don't think I'm right. I just disagree. Take a look at these charts. Let me explain to you how I see things and why. And I also want to stress, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just what I literally pulled up from my Twitter account. And I actually have someone right now researching, and we're going to do a report on this. First, the first chart we have on the left, and I understand it's small and hard to see. It's you can zoom in. It's much bigger in the Imager link. We can see here, the New York Times has done something interesting, and they've actually created a peripheral bit of evidence to my point. First, here's the red line, the Republicans. I've shown many of these things before. We're going to go through it. The Republicans have actually shifted a little to the left since 2012. A little to the left. The left. However, the Democrats, since 2008, shot so far to the left. They're to the left of centrists in Europe, which are like many democratic socialist countries. Now, what the New York Times has done, that's actually more evidence to my point, is that they put the median to the far left, comparing to the U.S. to foreign countries of which we have nothing to do with. I get it, we're allies. I'm talking about our country, our culture, and what we're doing. All that matters is we see this blue line jolting so far to the left, they're to the left of European parties. So where are the centrists? Still rather close to where the Republicans are, because the left has just skyrocketed, just far to the left as possible. Take a look at this chart, the next one, from Pew Research. Look where Democrats and Republicans were in 94. Look where they are in 2017. The Republicans have moved ever so slightly to the right. Granted, this other chart goes to 2016. And the Democrats have shot dramatically to the left. Okay? How many sources do you need for me to say the left is pushing too far? And so when I call that out, it doesn't mean I'm not on the left anymore. How about this one from The Economist that I show over and over again? We can see that the right has coalesced around a common bell curve, that meaning most people agree on their issues, and the left is flattening out. The left is not only fractured, but pushing to the far, far left. So I'm calling out these people. Now, if you want to say that's the left, the book of the left, fine, by all means. It doesn't mean I'm not still over here, closer to the center. That's where I'm at. How about this one from Quartz? We can see in 2018, where the arrow is pointing, a massive spike to the left in the Democrats. How much data do you need? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 charts. And this is not an exhaustive list. I have several others because there's still Gallup and Pew Research I didn't pull up showing the same thing. But I will show you this. As part of the fracture, evidence of the fracture, you can still see that there are a lot of Democrats that lean over to the conservative side. And you can see here, too, that Democrats still move towards the center. We can see here it's split very, very far to the left and to the center. And here we have Gallup. 54% this is a report from 2018, from November, want more moderate policy. That's what I want. I'm critical of Pelosi because she's a super elite corporate millionaire, not because of her stances for the most part. I'm critical because I think she's only opposing Trump for the sake of opposing him and not actually getting anything done. But I still defended her when it came to her conversations with AOC because I still think she's in a better political position on policy issues, as is, dare I say it, Joe Biden. Although I'm to the left, I just don't like these elite corporate phony Democrats. I don't think AOC has good intentions. The Green New Deal was a smack in the face to environmentalism, and I am an environmentalist who worked for 3, maybe even for 3 different environmental nonprofits in my life to campaign for environmental issues. That's not going to change, and I think AOC is doing damage. Now let's look at this. The next issue I see is that you can talk about the far left, but let's talk about identitarianism, okay? This is where the left is now embracing politics based on identity in beyond just, okay, it's hard to parse. The thing is, identity politics can be a good thing. Okay, the civil rights movement, for instance, did great things for my family, and I think it was great. But there's a certain point where instead of bringing us together and breaking barriers, they build them. And that's what's happening. In this chart, in this graph, you can see it says ANES 2018 pilot survey, mean in-group bias by race and ethnicity. White liberals have an out-group bias. They're the only group. They don't like themselves. It tends to be progressive activists tend to be college educated, making over $100,000 a year, and they don't like white people. That is part of the problem. It's not the root, it's not the core, it's not the greatest example of the entirety of the problem, but this should show you that something weird is happening when there's only one group, the white left, the Baitswa, that are hating themselves. It's weird. I've never, and this is the craziest thing, never in my life have I identified as white. In fact, I grew up in a mixed race neighborhood with a bunch of different ethnicities to a mixed race family, and we didn't really have that outside of being Americans. That's why it's all so alien to me. Then when I see what's going on with Elizabeth Warren putting pronouns in her profile, like, I get it, dude. Gillibrand embracing overt identitarianism. It is left-wing ideology, dogma, and it is associated with this regressive, authoritarian behavior that punishes people for asking questions. We're now seeing the rise of anti-science on the left. I will call that out. I don't care the Republicans don't believe in global warming. They never did. I do. Why is my side abandoning science? So yes, I'll call them out. Now the question is why? And this chart shows us these three. And there's a note. It's three graphs out of a dozen or so or more, pulled up by a guy named Zach Goldberg on Twitter. Diversity, inclusion, whiteness, unconscious bias skyrocket, according to LexisNexis in media. And these are just the first three, okay? And there's a huge list of all of these other things that even check for bias. The word the word if, the word boat. They use regular neutral words to see if there were spikes similarly. The issue being, is this due to the increase in articles or is it due to the increase in frequency of words? And it is due to the increase in frequency of words, not the increase in news, period. And finally, this last one, which I guess it's really hard to see because of the way this is shaped, but it's really tiny. I'll do my best. Let me see if I can zoom in manually. See the blue line on the left? I can't really do anything to get a better view because of the way way this works, but you can see your white conservatives get their media from a mix of liberal and conservative sources. Liberals overwhelmingly get their news from liberal sources. Very, very little of their media, less than 10%, around 5%, comes from conservative sources. Combine that with this, and you can see that left-wing sources are increasingly talking about wokeness and this ideology. What this says to me is that the media diet of the left is worse than conservatives, and it results in a biased worldview. Now you can see moderate here reads a little bit of conservative news and a lot of liberal news, and that explains me quite perfectly. I predominantly try to use the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Associated Press, and Reuters, mainstream and NPR, PBS, left-leaning sources, but I do use a lot of conservative sources too. So what happens is liberals don't know about a lot of these stories. They don't know these things are happening because they're in a bubble, but they're inundated with this. And that results in what we see, a dramatic shift to the far left. They're only reading their own news, they're getting themselves angry, they're writing more, and it's a circular bubble that's resulting in left-wing identitarianism. The problem is way more complicated than I've presented. But I hope this is a good explanation for what's going on with the left, why I think the left is being lost, because it's not about a cohesive left. It's not about a bunch of socialists, right? If it was just socialism coming into the Democrats, there's an argument to be had. But it's a combination of regressive tactics, authoritarianism, socialist ideology that's met with, by any means necessary, calls to violence, championing of terror and other horrifying practices that is not being called out ever. And it freaks me out. And the Republicans are wearing their suits and doing their Republican thing like normal. That can be criticized. And there you have it. I don't make videos to cater to the crazy people. I'm trying to call them out and trying to, look, I don't make content for anybody. I make content the way I see it, and that's it. Maybe as a moderate, because I see the news similarly to how conservatives see it, that's what we get. But a better example or better explanation could simply be how Vox sees it. After Andy Ngo was attacked, Vox said, the left has one view and the center and the right have another. The left has gone so far left that the right and the center are closer to each other. And I've said this over and over again. Me as someone center left, absolutely center left, I have more in common with conservatives than I do with where the left is today, even though I'm probably to the left of Barack Obama. So what do I do when I say we need someone who is like Obama but a little bit better? Bad foreign policy. We don't get it. There's literally, look at the gap between the Democrats and the Republicans. I'll tell you this. Most Americans, while we are seeing a big shift to the left here, There's going to be a lot of Americans confused. And that's who I talk to. And that was the point of that tweet. Trump will win because I'm being told by my friends who are lifelong Democrats they're not going to vote this time or they're going to vote independent. It's not an exaggeration. It's anecdotal. They're just my friends. Like, who are you voting for? And they're like, these people freak me out. What do you think's going to happen? I don't know. But anyway, thanks for hanging out. The next segment will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. Podcast every day, 6:30 p.m. And I will see you all tomorrow.